welcome to our podcast. We've got Sam Valenti today from Essential Solar. Essential Solar is a Melbourne company, has been established for quite a while. Welcome to our podcast, Sam.
Thank you, Markus.
Now, Essential Solar, how long have you been going in Melbourne?
Essentially, established 2012, so quite a few years now, 13 odd years. And yeah, it's essentially we started off as a automation company back in 2001. So we've got quite a bit of history behind us.
Right. So when you got into solar in 2012-13, that would have been around the time that a lot of companies all went into it. And then 4 or 5 years later, a lot of them went out of it again because the product they sold was pretty crap.
Yeah.
So you guys actually done the full 12, 15 year kind of span, which means it's an established company. You're using good product.
Absolutely.
So what's the key kind of products in the game that you're using?
Look, I think for us, you've got the bigger brands, your Fronius, your Solar Edge, your Enphase, all that sort of stuff. We try to stick with the more premium brands where we can, purely because, we've seen it for the last 10, 12 years perform quite well. I mean,
to viewers, you can get cheaper gear. The problem comes when it comes to after sales or it comes to repairs. I've seen people without an inverter for about 6 months waiting for something to be shipped back from overseas because there was no local stock.
Yep.
I mean, you do see cheaper stuff out there?
All the time.
And what, needs a repair or?
Oh, look, I just see a lot of the cheap stuff getting flogged in the market, and I think to myself, cheap isn't always best. I'm not going to say there isn't anything good in the market that's in the lower category, but certainly, I would like something more tried and tested, if I was to install on my own property.
I mean, solar will give you, if you go solar only, on a normal household, about $1,600, $1,700 benefit a year, up to $2,000 really, if you use it smartly.
Of course.
So I always say to people, if you get it something $1,500 cheaper or even $2,000 cheaper, that's 1 year longer wait. But if it lasts 15 years longer, you make 30 grand more on your $2,000 extra investment. So why wouldn't you do the better quality stuff?
Well, you're not going to get that investment at the bank, right? So at the end of the day, it makes perfect sense to just do it right the first time, and that's what we're all about.
Now, what's your vision? How do you see the whole solar thing evolving? We're now hearing more and more battery sales. Are you doing more battery sales?
Yeah, I've seen an increase in battery sales. The attachment rate has definitely increased. I think now with the talks of this election and the potential battery rebate, I think it's going to increase in terms of how many we do. It's going to certainly make more people open to it. I believe that's a bit of an important factor as well.
So if I come to you, Essential Solar, Melbourne, I got a new house and I say, do I go solar or do I go solar battery? And there's a solar battery rebate about. Which way do you advise me?
I suppose you've got to understand people's usage patterns as well. I mean, at the end of the day, I would always try to say to someone, a battery is worth considering, and if you can consider it, get what you can afford. Don't overdo it, because there's always expandability. You get the right product, you can expand. You get the wrong product, you don't really leave yourself with many options. But I definitely don't see any disadvantage now to having a battery option on the home.
And maybe go with something relatively small, price point wise, but that then you can expand, is it?
Absolutely.
So is there a brand that you use that does that?
Admittingly, our most popular is the BYD, the Fronius BYD combo. It just works well and it does everything you want to do and it's expandable. So, the warranties are there, guarantees are there, the history is there. We've been using them for years and I'm never going to say you've never ever had a problem, but it's how people respond and how companies respond and manufacturers respond that plays a key role in all this.
So when you say you've used the BYD and the Fronius combo for quite a few years, so no issues, reliable, what's the story?
Usually pretty reliable, I must say. In terms of the operation of the system, obviously quite easy to use, and people can go through and look at their monitoring and see in real time what it's doing. I think the most common fault that we may have had is your data manager might have an issue or something like that, but that doesn't stop the system from operating. In most cases, and obviously the implementation of backup as well. People want to know that if I've got a battery, do I get backup as standard? And I usually like to talk to people about having backup as an option, but it's not a standard inclusion. You've got to. There are other equipment and items required, if you want to call it, to make all that work.
So you're telling me that actually some people sell a battery and don't tell people there is no backup in it? I mean, wouldn't I, when I buy a battery, naturally want to have backup?
I would assume, right? But that's my assumption. And this is what a lot of people do. They assume they're getting something. My advice to you, whether you'd be dealing with us or any other reputable company, is ask the question. You know, if I'm getting this battery, if I'm investing all this money into a battery, am I actually going to have the backup benefits as well? Or is that even an option with this particular system? You know, it's not just Fronius BYD. There are other options. You know, we do SolarEdge as well. And, you know, fantastic product, a different sort of field, if you want to call it. But you've got the opportunity to do that if that's what you want to do. But ask the question and tell us what it is that you want to back up, because not all inverters work the same.
Meaning, what I want to explain to people who listen is that basically what I want to explain to people who see this is that backup is a very long string. You can have a backup that is only one power point and one light in the house. You can have a whole of house backup with the battery. And depending on what you want to spend on the money, that's the kind of backup you're going to get.
Of course.
And would you explain that to people?
Absolutely.
But do people sometimes buy stuff from other solar companies where it's all left a bit murky and they think they're getting one thing, but they're getting something else?
I'm to be quite honest, I wouldn't be surprised. You know, when you come across people that say, I've got a cheaper price, and it's like, yeah, okay, but let's break it down and let's see where that cheaper price comes from, because surely we're not talking about apples and apples here. We have to be talking about apples and oranges, right? Mm-hmm. So something's got to give. For us, it's a case of, okay, if you're after backup, that's what you want, not a problem. What are the critical things you must have? What are the must-haves? Because there's no point saying, all right, we'll give you whole house backup, you turn everything on, and then it turns the inverter off, and you say, oh, well, where's the backup? It's like, well, hang on a minute, we've got to understand a little bit more, and then we can advise you in the right direction. You know, it's all about education. That's the way I look at it. So
basically, I can give you a mini battery, give you a whole of house backup, but within 10 minutes...
Absolutely. If you know, and this is another thing we try to educate people on is, you can have a battery and you can have the backup option, but if you set a small reserve, well, you're not going to have much time to run anything, right? So it's important that you also understand that reserve is going to be reserved. It's not going to be operating in normal condition. So there's no point in having this, you know, 5 kilowatt hour or 10 kilowatt hour battery, let's say, and, you know, you're only able to use your loads for, let's say, 10 minutes.
Because you've put such big loads on it.
Absolutely.
So how do you size a house size with what is the right battery size?
Good question. Look, that can come down to a few things. Ultimately, I think it's important that your PV needs to be able to support the battery as well. There's no point putting in this, you know, I'm going to go put a big 22 kilowatt hour battery in and I've only got 4 kilowatt of PV, because if you're using that PV during the day, then it's not going towards the battery, which means it isn't going to be supporting you in the afternoon and evening. So I think it's quite important that when we're looking at the battery capacity, we understand the usage patterns during the day of how people are, you know, that could be at work, the system's generating, fantastic. Let's put that power into the battery rather than send it back to the grid at essentially nothing, because that's what it is. But at least you'll then get the benefit of having that capability in the evening time, which is certainly useful. But of course, you know, I find in most systems that we do, if we size it up right, most of the time the battery's full within the first couple of hours of generation. You know what I mean?
Right. So early morning, don't use too much, fill the battery up, and then at the later time in the afternoon and the evening, you just use it again.
Absolutely.
Would you agree with the kind of thinking that to really get a battery and make it fully useful, you need a strong horse at the front end. You need a decent sized solar system. If you're in a little terrace house with a tiny little solar that you can put on, then your battery and your solar is mismatched, isn't it? So what's the size solar for maybe a 4-person household that you should have minimum?
Look, it's a good question. I would say, in my opinion, you know, anywhere between your sort of 10 to 13 is a sort of right range, in my opinion. Of course, if you've got the right PV to go with it, that's always a bonus. But then, you know, you've got the VPP options coming out as well. I mean, they're already out in the market now, but that's where you can pick up a bit more of an added benefit.
Right. So explain VPP to me a little bit. It's interesting. It's not a VW. It's not a V something. What's VPP?
Your virtual power plant. Yeah. So,
right.
So my understanding is basically we can use a bit of time of use and let the the retailer, essentially the VPP operator, control part of your battery to charge and discharge at the most beneficial to you times as well as the network.
So hang on a second. I have a battery.
Yep.
So you're explaining VPP to me.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me if I get this right. You got a battery.
Mm-hmm.
I set it at 50%. I don't want to go below that because I want that for my house.
Of course.
But the top 50% when it's full, I give it to the VPP operator. Do you use one specifically you recommend?
Look, there's a lot of hype around Amber, and I don't see any disadvantage to working with them at all.
All right, so let's call it Amber. So then you give Amber 50% rights of your battery, and you see they're going very high, $10 a kilowatt hour. And you go, oh, wow, I got 5 spare kilowatt hours to send out. I'll pop that out now.
Yeah, just make yourself $50.
Right. So that's how it works, is it?
Essentially, along those lines, yeah.
And so, but I don't have to sit there somewhere, watch the wholesale stock market on my electricity. That's just done automatically, is it?
That's what they're there for. Let them do it. Let them do the hard yards.
So that's all automatically with algorithms and all that, is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's all controlled by those guys. And look, they put a lot of time and effort into making that work for both sides. Obviously, they're not in it for nothing, but at the same time, if we can, load shift, if you want to call it, then it can be quite beneficial for both parties.
I mean, I think with Amber, the difference is they really only charge you a subscription. While if you go, let's say, with the AGLs and Origins, I hear that the majority of the benefits are really sucked up by the big energy retailers, and the end customer really ends up not with as much. So it's probably recommended to shop around for that.
100%. Look, we should be doing a bit more of that ourselves, and it's certainly on our agenda to find the right sort of solution so we can talk about that with our customers when we're talking about batteries and VPP options.
So if I go to Essential Solar in Melbourne and say, what can you offer me for my new house? What are the services you offer?
Obviously we've got solar. That's our bread and butter. But batteries, heat pumps, obviously EV charging, which is definitely picking up. We've noticed, and then obviously in the future we've got your air conditioning and HVAC stuff, which is a bit of a specialised trade.
So you're looking to move into that as well. But when it comes to solar and batteries, does it kind of now naturally, do you get more demand for EV chargers as well?
We're starting to see a bit more of an uptake, particularly those that are asking about the vehicle-to-grid options or vehicle-to-load options. I actually had a question a couple of days ago about that, and I said, look, it's coming. It's definitely coming, right? It's a matter of when and which vehicles are going to be able to do it, and which chargers are going to be able to do it. So I know Fronius has their Wattpilot Flex, which essentially is ready to go, which is expected in the next couple of months. And I think that's going to be a bit of a game changer as well.
Right. Now, what do you do? Commercial solar?
We do. I must admit, it's not something we've specialised in the long term. We've always been capable, of doing it, but it is something now that we are starting to see a bit more interest in as well. Right.
So when it comes to Essential Solar in Melbourne, and I have other competitors all around you. It's a very tough market in Melbourne.
It is.
How do you set yourself apart? What is it that you guys offer that maybe some of the others don't?
Yeah, good question. I suppose for us, it's really about the customer service side of things. We invest in the right people, and I don't just say that with customer service, I say that with the whole team. We've got our own in-house engineers that basically are dedicated to doing all the right designs and calculations that are required. In-house service is quite important as well. So, at the end of the day, you invest in a system and you have an issue with it. We've got a dedicated tech support. You can call the tech support anytime, basically, during business hours, of course. But you can speak to our tech guys. And if we can't find a resolution with your system, then obviously we can come out to site and we've got an in-house guy that does that. So in terms of long-term support, you've got that with us.
How many systems would Essential Solar would have installed in Melbourne so far?
Well, I would say well over 6,500.
Right.
Yeah.
When it comes to Essential Solar in regards to end customers, do you get recommendations and stuff?
Yeah, we do. So Google's obviously one of them that's quite strong and getting stronger all the time. So we're sitting at about 4.9 right now, which, to be fair, anyone that's sitting on exactly five stars, I sort of questioned. But no, look, I think it's quite fair. We've got multiple sources, your Facebook, your Solar Choice and Solar Quotes. Of course, Solar Quotes, we've got a really good review platform with those guys. And I think it's important that people that have had a great experience or even maybe not a great experience, because that happens in this industry. And I'm not going to say that we're perfect and we never have a problem. Quite honestly, everybody has a hiccup here and there. I think it's quite important how that company deals with those hiccups. And our reviews reflect that. So we've got quite a good response online, and a lot of people see that and make inquiries online, and obviously come through based on a lot of the stuff that they see as well.
So let's say customer service, you have an unexpected issue happen. Let's say an inverter didn't arrive in time, you can't install on that day. How do you handle it?
Yeah, good question. I mean, there's a few factors. Sometimes it could be that we got out to site and we've started doing the installation, and the inverter happened to be the wrong one. And it's rare because we've got some pretty strict processes before things leave our warehouse, and everything's serialized, and inventory management and all that sort of stuff that's important, because it also means that customers generally don't get the wrong stuff. Now, if that happened, it's a matter of, okay, can we get someone in the car now, get it out there, or is it a case of, all right, we're going to have to reschedule and deal with that? And obviously, communication to the customer is the most important thing. If you leave them in the dark, they're not going to be very happy. I mean, I wouldn't be happy. So communication in that respect, and how we deal with it is always useful.
When I started in solar, I think some solar panels had about 5 or 10-year warranties. Now they're going to 25. Can you explain the whole warranty game a little bit? I mean, they seem to be awfully long.
Look, our warranties are pretty straightforward. Most panels these days offer a 20, 25-year product warranty. Performance, essentially 25 to 30 years. And look, as you know, from many years ago, it was like 10, 15 years. Now we're talking about up to 30. And even with Maxeon, for example, at 40 years. I mean, that's just crazy. But obviously they stand by their product, right? Most inverter manufacturers are giving a standard 10 years. And I think it's important that people understand, especially with us dealing with reputable companies, that, if they're giving a parts and labour warranty, it's always that peace of mind to a customer that, touch wood, if we were to shut down, and that's certainly not our approach, but they've got the peace of mind that knowing they've got a product that is backed by the manufacturer, and the manufacturer is going to pay an external company to go out and fix that for them. So they're not really going to be in the lurch, if you want to call it.
What about the workmanship warranty?
Yeah, it's important as well. So we offer a standard 10 years, and that's just we've been doing 10 years for many years now. A lot of companies will do 5. We've had it as a 10, and that essentially is saying that, the product we've put up on your roof, we stand by for 10 years, that the quality of the workmanship and the way we've installed it is good enough. So
basically, if one of the brackets falls off or anything like that, that's what the workmanship warranty is about?
That's what it's about. It does come as a bit of a discrepancy sometimes in terms of, you might have a system installed for 5 years, and you may just happen to get a roof leak. And first thing that people say is, it's got to be the solar installation, because, I've had nobody on my roof for 5 years, right? And look, I understand where that point comes from, but at the same time, there is also something that not many people like to think about, and it's really general wear and tear. I mean, they're out in the elements. We have crazy weather at times, and it's not always a case of because the solar's up on your roof that's what's caused a roof leak. And sometimes we've actually gone out to site and the roof leak's nowhere even near the panels. So the point I was getting at, though, is we actually went to site. So, I think it's important that we do investigate and see what's involved.
I mean, I've seen gutters completely blocked just from the leaves,
exactly.
etc. I mean, you have to have maintenance on your house.
You do, and it's important that you do. How you run your house is up to you, but I think it's important you do get those checks done every couple of years, and just get it all checked out and make sure for yourself and your own peace of mind that everything's going well.
I can buy the best solar gear. Can a poor install still stuff it up?
Absolutely, 100%, and we see it so many times. There's actually been times we've gone to jobs and, we've been called out for a health check, for example, which is another service we do. And, another company's installed it 2-3 years ago. We're getting out there and we're seeing absolute mess. And what I mean is most of it is okay. I'm not going to say that it's a complete schmozzle, but there'll be times where we get up on the roof and there'll be, cables hanging down, touching the roof, especially tin roof. End clamps that haven't been put on properly, some of them even missing. And it's the sad part about it really is the owner doesn't know unless they get up there and check like we are, which you wouldn't expect, anyone to just jump up on the roof.
I'm not doing it anymore.
No. but yeah, and that happens. And unfortunately, the companies that do that and they're no longer in business, they disappear because obviously they're just doing things unethically. Ultimately, the customer's a loser there. And that's what we're trying to educate people, that you don't just get anything because it's the sake of ticking a box and saying, hey, I've got solar, tick. It's a case of let's do it right. Let's understand what the best overall is, and let's make sure that you don't have these hassles in the future.
I want to get solar and a battery.
Yep.
Do I now focus more on the price, more on the products that are being offered, or on the company that actually is the one that's doing the job?
That is it's an easy but a tough answer. And I say that because it's important. All three of them are a consideration when you think about it. What I find is the heart of the system is probably the most important. So the heart being the inverter, the one that's going to deal with all the power, followed by the panels, obviously. And then obviously the installer is important. And, ways that we manage our installation process is also have independent auditing. Solar Victoria run around and do audits, and I think it's great. Pick up on those that are doing a shonky job and get them out of the industry. We don't want them there. But we also, as a company, run internal audits, and we manage our processes that way, is making sure that whoever's, when the jobs are getting done, they're done to our high standards. And we go out, we take photos, we do reports, not on every single job. But we definitely get out there and do that. And that keeps us in the loop as to the quality of workmanship that we've got going on those properties.
Wow. Now, you've got a lot of solar experience. If you could give me the top 4 things or 5 things I should consider, if I want to go solar, how do I get a good outcome?
Good question. I would say, look, don't just jump at anything. Don't just look at online and you see people saying, oh, look, zero out of pocket and all that. A lot of it is just a grab to get you interested. And obviously, if you're already looking for solar, you've already got an interest. You obviously know that there's going to be a benefit there. I wouldn't just jump at anything you see. I think it's important to understand the company and how long they've been in business. That's quite important. We've seen over the years, as you know, a lot of companies that have come in, done absolute rock bottom prices that I can't even understand how people, how do you survive, and then disappear.
Well, they didn't survive.
Well, exactly, right? and that's the key point, right? They didn't survive, and ultimately the losers are the customers. Now, for us...
Because there's no warranty, there's no backup, there's nobody who really wants to touch that system.
Yeah.
And often, do they get pulled off?
Look, it can happen, absolutely. We had a job that it was only 2 years old, and there was an issue with the compliance component. The installer did the job for this customer. It was a decent-sized job. I think it was about 60 kilowatt. Basically, didn't lodge the paperwork. They called us for a health check. We went out there and we said, okay, well, we have to inspect the system. Cut a long story short, we found so many breaches, and basically the customer said, listen, it's not worth what we're going to spend to rectify everything, because obviously if they want us to certify it, we have to rectify it to make it to comply to now, and we have to put our name on it. So I'm not going to do that if it's not compliant. And cut a long story short, we had to take it off and we started again, and obviously the customer is the one that lost out of all that. The company are no longer in business, but they couldn't get connected to the grid, right? So paperwork was never lodged, and now we can't just go and certify it. We need to look at other options.
Right. So, what was that? Buy cheap, buy twice.
Yes, essentially along those lines in nice words.
Now, if I come to you at Essential Solar in Melbourne, I think you're near Tullamarine Airport.
Yeah, nice and close.
And I say to you, look, I've got a $1,000 bill here every quarter. What can you do for me? How can you calculate my potential savings?
Yeah, good question. We have our own in-house fully developed quote tool, which helps us obviously spec up the right system. But also understanding and breaking down your bill is important. There's no point saying, oh, look, this system, it's, X amount of kilowatts is going to generate X amount of power every day, and it's going to save you X amount of dollars. That's all based in a perfect world. And as you know, especially in Melbourne, the weather is never consistent. It's always up and down and all over the place. So we try and take an average, but also percentage of use during the day versus the nighttime. There's no point basing your system on all the usage getting used during the day. I mean, ultimately, if you can use all your power during the day, then yes, you are going to save the most amount of money. But not everybody's home during the day. And this is where batteries become even more attractive, because batteries help you use that power during the day and let you use it later. But we do a full bill analysis. We break it all down, and that's why we ask for your bill. It's not because we want to give you work to do, but if you help us, we can help you in that respect. And understanding your usage patterns as well helps us spec up the right system.
So basically, if you see my electricity bill and you see when I use my electricity, that allows you to help me design the system?
Yeah, but also understanding from you as well how you're using your power. So what I mean by that is if you're working, if you're...
I come home at 3 o'clock, let's say.
Let's say. So you've still got a couple of hours there of decent generation in the afternoon. Obviously, no point if you don't have a west roof or a north roof and, everything's on the east, hypothetically. But if you've got options for us to set up the array right, then, absolutely, you can benefit from that.
Now, I heard that the feed-in tariff used to be very high in Melbourne, was 60 cents and all that. That's all has changed now. What's the story?
Yeah, it all came crashing down in November last year, November 2024. It was the big... it came around quick when you think about it. It's about 10 odd years. But yeah, basically now we're sitting at about 3.3, I think. It's set to be 0 before we know it. The goalpost, in my opinion, has changed. And it's changed because back then you would get solar for the benefit of the 60-cent feed-in tariff. That was the main reason. Now you're getting solar to avoid buying from the grid. That's what it's all about. You don't do it you can do it for the sake of it if you want to, no problem. But essentially, as I said, the goalpost has changed. So if we can, change how we use our power, especially during the day and especially with a battery, then absolutely, it makes perfect sense to not give it back to the grid and just save it for yourself and save not having to buy it from the grid. The grid independence is what we're aiming for.
Now, if I do have one of those small older style systems and I had a good outcome and now suddenly, bango, I get a new bill and it's terrible, my system still works. It's sitting right in the middle of the roof. It's hard to put another system around it without moving it. What's the option?
It is. And look, we have this conversation actually frequently now that we're seeing a lot more inquiries come through from customers that have got existing systems and have, understood all the benefits over the years. Sometimes it's actually better to take it down and start fresh. And I don't mean that because you sort of say to yourself, well, why waste something good and something that's working? And I say, well, I get that, but you might have 6 panels up on prime real estate of your roof, and it's only producing, let's say, a kilowatt. What was the point of keeping it in that spot? I mean, if we take it down, okay, you get a new set of warranties, a whole new system that's much more efficient than what it used to be. We're sitting at 470 as probably the average system panel these days, where before it was like 180, 190, 200, 250. 300 was the big one. But yeah, we're just seeing an increase. And obviously, if we can maximise what's on your roof now, then it just means you've got one solution rather than multiple.
Okay, got that. Now, a lot of people talk about there will be smart homes and solar will be integrated in the battery. How's that whole thing going to play out? Yeah,
look, I think automation's definitely becoming more of a consideration in a lot of these properties. And obviously, the electrification component as well, people getting off gas and looking at ways they can switch over to more electric options. I think really with automation, it's just a matter of, how can we program things to work better in our favour. And, we see it now with SolarEdge. We see it with, there's actually another company that we're in talks with now that is developing a bit of a home assistant sort of function. And that's going to be quite exciting. That's going to be quite a good option for a lot of people. And it's just a matter of, understanding it and implementing it.
But is that all about then increasing the self-consumption during daylight hours?
Ultimately, channeling power where you can. And again, a lot of that would probably come down to a battery, where possible, of course. But yeah, wherever you can do that.
So if we now get batteries, maybe with a rebate, down to a price point that from an ROI perspective, they make a lot of sense, is that going to be a game changer?
I think it will. I think, look, you can go in 2 ways about it, right? You can say, I think the battery rebate's really, really good. And you can also say, I think the battery rebate's a bit... Now, as a...
Hang on, that's free money. Why would that...
True, because what it does is it opens up the doors for a lot of these companies that push below par products.
You mean... If you put a rebate on solar battery, the crap companies who are in solar only will move across into the battery space, and a poorly installed battery is much more dangerous than a poorly installed solar. Is that what you're saying? So really don't buy cheap batteries.
Avoid it. is my advice. Avoid it at all costs, because ultimately, once you've got it and it's there, you can't then go and claim another rebate anyway. That's done. You see,
so you wasted your rebate on a shitty product, and then if it fails, you're stuffed.
Yes, and it's the same thing. In Victoria, we've got Solar Victoria. Those that went and got something cheap and nasty and having issues with it, and the company's gone, you can't get another Solar Vic rebate. Which is a bit of a disappointment, and it's not always the case.
Can't you? Let's say if you got a tenant or a new homeowner, does the new homeowner get it again, or is it only once for per property?
My understanding is it's the property.
Right. So if you bought crap, got your rebate, it packed it up, and now you need another one, you have to actually put your hand in your pocket and pay the full lot, is it?
Pretty much. Yep.
So
not ideal.
Better to buy something good in the first place.
Well, it is. And look, I understand not everyone's in the same financial position as some others, and that works both ways. But the point I'm trying to make really is, if you're going to do it, don't just settle for anything. Don't just settle for a ticking of the box and saying, hey, I've got it. Let's make sure that you've gone, you've done your research. You do it with a reputable company. You do it with reputable brands. For us, we don't just go and put any product out in our offering. It's quite important that we, as a company, do our own due diligence and make sure that we believe the products that we're offering are going to stand up for the long term, and the manufacturer is going to be there to support not only us but the homeowner as well. Because there's no point just getting anything to say, hey, I've got solar, and then all of a sudden you're having issues. And it might not be in the first year or two. You might get 2 great years out of it and everything's going well, and then something might give, and then it's just crickets. And ultimately, you don't want that.
What do you mean with crickets? There's nobody answering the phone, is it? Or
no one's answering the phone, or tech support is backing up, and and ultimately that's a system that's sitting there doing nothing, which should be doing something for you.
Got it. I've seen some solar panels. They're got the white lines, and then they're full black ones. Which ones do you sell, and what do you recommend?
Tough one, because we do both. We do both. Some people like the aesthetics of things. People like an all black and all sleek sort of system. I personally don't really have a preference. I mean, I think the technology of the panel and the efficiency of the panel is quite important. But yeah, I mean, you've got different options. All black, white back sheet. I think white back sheet probably keeps a little bit cooler, which is a bit nicer. And obviously the cooler, the more efficient, and the more efficient, the more power. But yeah, you've got a few options. And this is why for us as a company too, we don't offer you, 20 different brands. We sort of brought it down to the top 5, and that's what we offer. And if you want anything else, well, we can probably get that for you, but is it the right option? Is it the right solution? Maybe not.
Let's play a little game here.
Okay.
I call you.
Yep.
Hi, Sam from Essential Solar. I want a 6.6 kilowatt system.
Something we're very familiar with. And what we find is it's generally the reason people do that is probably the first, 3 or 4 companies that they've called and said that, phrase to, if you want to call it, just gives them what they want. You want a 5 kilowatt Wi-Fi inverter with some tier 1 panels. Yeah, it's,
But I mean, that's how the cheap stuff sells it.
Exactly.
So the people are already brainwashed because they heard 6.6 or 10.2 or 13.2, and then they're just worried about that because that's what 3 or 4 people then copied them.
Yep.
And what's your answer?
Well, how do you know you need a 6.6? How do you know 6.6 is the answer for you? Where did you get that from? Oh, my friend told me that's what I need. And it's like, okay, but how do we know? We're the ones that have to support you throughout the whole process. And this is why understanding your consumption and your bill is critically important.
So basically, you would get a call for a 6.6 where the person has $1,000 bill or the person has a $300 bill, and they would have no correlation between it. They wouldn't understand it, but they'd just listen to some sales guy. Is that it?
Usually that's what we find. What we try to do is at least, we're happy to give you a quote. That's not an issue. But I want to make sure that we're giving you the right option first. And if ultimately your budget is, okay, I've got plenty of roof space. I've got plenty of space to put all the panels where I need to, and I might have some space for some more in the future, and a 6.6 is the option for you, then great. We can give you some options on that. But what I'd be looking at is, okay, well, that might suit you now, but what about in the next year or two? What about when you decide that you may want to get an EV? Is a 6.6 going to still be sufficient? Maybe, if you put a battery and you're using a lot of power, you guys might work from home or have people home during the day and use a lot more of that power. Is that going to be the answer? Maybe not. And this is why we don't want to just give you a price without educating you on, the types of products and the types of, warranties and guarantees and so on to suit now and the future.
Right. I hear that feed-in tariffs are coming down. So does it make solar less attractive?
Put it this way. I think I mentioned a little bit earlier about the goalpost being changed. And that was, again, a lot of people were getting solar back in the day, if you want to call it, to get the high feed-in tariff. So they were spending probably a lot more than what they spend these days on a smaller system and all to get that 60-cent feed-in tariff. Where now it's like, okay, because there's no feed-in tariff, essentially it's going to disappear anyway eventually. We're sort of saying, well, you're not there to benefit from the feed-in tariff anymore. That's not the reason you do solar. The reason you do it is to minimise what you buy from the grid, because at the end of the day, if the cost of electricity went, and it will eventually, I mean, I strongly feel like, I remember the days, for example, when it was 16 cents, 18 cents. And now we're sitting at, an average of, say, 33 to 35 cents. What happens if overnight it just miraculously went to 50 cents, 60 cents? What are you going to do? Turn off everything in the house? I'm not saying that that's exactly what's going on, but it certainly feels like it's heading in that direction. It's not coming down. And the only way is by minimising your reliance on the grid. So, if you've got a decent enough system that can do that, then obviously, you're going to reap the benefit a lot faster.
Are EVs going to be responsible for making solar systems bigger?
I think it makes a bit more sense that, if you've got more of a demand and you've got the roof space, then, you should be looking at maximising that, especially if it's going to be your home for the next few years. Some people talk about, look, I only want to get a cheap system because I'm only going to be here for the next 2 years. And then in 2 years' time, you might get a phone call back from that customer that just never did it and said, hey, I want to get another quote. And what can you offer me? And say, hang on a minute, I talked to you 2 years ago. I thought you were moving. Oh, yeah, no, things have changed, because look at the market, the way it's going. What I'm trying to say is that you're never really going to lose if you were to get the right system, even if you're not going to stay there long term. Because ultimately, you talk to any real estate agent, I don't see any real estate agent coming in and saying, if you put solar on your house, you're going to devalue your property, right? So what I'm trying to say is that, if you do it right the first time, I think the new owners are going to love you.
I mean, if you can clearly demonstrate your before and after solar bills and therefore can say, look, there's $3,500 savings, that should add value to the house.
Absolutely, without a doubt. I mean, if you've got a solar system that's up on the roof and not really working, or maybe not working at all, it's sort of like you're giving me rubbish with the sale of the house. That's not good.
Yeah, I got to get rid of it.
Yeah, so
got it.
Yeah.
What battery brands do you recommend and why?
Look, our primary battery offering at the moment is BYD with Fronius. Why? They've been around for many years. They're one of the biggest manufacturers overseas, and the history stands for itself. The support is definitely there as well between Fronius and BYD. And, we've had, if I have to be honest, we've spoken to Fronius more than we've spoken to BYD. And it's not, sometimes it's minor things that are just, a quick firmware upgrade and it could be fine. Most of the time, you don't require anything, but BYD is definitely there. We've also got Solar Edge as an option. Enphase is there as well. But really, SunGrow is certainly come a long way as well. It's certainly one of our better offerings as well. The stacking capabilities there, they've been around. A lot of people used to look at them thinking, SunGrow, GoodWe, and GoodWe's great too. We've got those options and they're only getting better. They're innovating constantly, listening to the feedback of the market, looking at the data and saying, right, we need to improve, and they're doing it, and we're happy to support those companies.
Do you see anything in the next 2 to 3 years that's happening, that whole solar and battery space, that many people maybe think about who are in the industry, but the ordinary customer hasn't heard about?
In what way?
Maybe vehicle to grid, what's happening there?
Yeah, I suppose that's a good point. I think not a lot of people are talking about that right now. I mean, the cluey ones are sort of, the ones that are following the trail are onto it. But I think that's going to play an important part with some of those properties that maybe can't have a battery or don't have a lot of space for a battery, but, they've got an EV and they want to try and offset some of their nighttime, that vehicle to grid or vehicle to load option is certainly something that I think is definitely going to get bigger.
So can you explain that? What happens? Do I drive my car in the garage and it becomes my power station, or what?
Well, put it this way. I've got a BYD Seal and fantastic car. Love it. Drives really well. It's got an 82 kilowatt hour battery in it. So because I live close to work, I don't have to charge it all the time, which is handy. But when I do charge it, we've got 15 kilowatt up on the roof, right? So I just plug it in on a Friday afternoon or Friday morning, and by the afternoon it's full, essentially. What we're saying is I could take that home. If I had a vehicle to grid charger at home or vehicle to load charger at home, I could take the car home and I could plug it in. And I can do this every day, right? Because I've got solar up on the roof. So people that are working in, factories or wherever else, doesn't matter where, if you've got access to a charger, you can charge your car from during the day where we need to get rid of the power that's, going everywhere. We can take the car home, we can plug it into the house essentially, and discharge a certain amount, as long as we've got enough to get to work the next day. But essentially, we can plug it in and run the house off the car. So does that mean that you shouldn't have a home battery? Well, no. But what we're saying is that that's an option for those that maybe can't, or and even if they can't, it's an option to channel some of that power out of the car into the house, use it at nighttime, and then the next day drive to work, plug it in, and do the same thing again.
So basically the way that we used to have power in a coal-fired power station, sending it all around, a one-way direction, it's now all changing, where even cars becoming supply. Yep. I mean, oh my God, it's going to get very, very complicated.
It certainly feels that way, and I suppose it's important for companies like ours to still stay in touch with all that stuff and understand it. And again, we've got the resources to do that, and obviously we want to be a part of that journey, because I certainly see it happening. It's already starting to happen now, but once the floodgates open, essentially,
when they do allow vehicles to connect back into your house and supply power, that's what you're talking about?
Essentially, yep, that's the one.
And that's a game changer, is it?
I think it will be. I don't think it's going to be crazy at the start, but I know that there'll be people that have been following it for a while saying, I need to do this. They're the ones that are going to jump on board. Once we start to see how much of an impact and benefit that makes, a lot more people will follow suit, especially if you've already got an EV. Makes perfect sense. Of course, you have to make sure that your car can actually do that, or it's capable of doing that. Which, you'd have to investigate that yourself. But,
not all EVs can do it.
Not all EVs can, and that's what you have to understand. Don't just, hey, I bought myself a car, and all of a sudden you go home and plug in your Wattpilot Flex, and all of a sudden it's not doing what you want to do, and you say, oh, well, this is all a scam. It's not. It's just making sure you ask the right questions and understand, and, ask the companies like us to do that, and we'll guide you in the right direction.
Now, let's say I've gone to Essential Solar in Melbourne. I liked you. I bought a solar and battery from you. What happens now? Do I have to take a week off from work?
No. Unless you feel like it, but sometimes we all do.
Work from home?
No. So we've got a pretty good process, and I think processes are important with companies, especially like ours, that you don't just sign up and say, here's the paperwork, all right, what next? And we say, oh, good question. So no, with us, essentially you authorise us, you sign up, you go ahead with us. Then our customer service team contacts you and says, hey, we've got all your stuff. Can you just confirm these details, whatever else? Our engineer will then look at all the submission, so the paperwork, the photos, the pre-design that the salesperson's done, and basically review it and make sure that, hey, this can actually work. Or actually, no, it can't. Or actually, hey, I think we need to go and site inspect this. Because what we don't want to do is just turn up on the day and say, that's not how it's supposed to work, because that happens, right? And this is another thing that I find in the industry, where people get a quote, obviously from us, get a quote from someone else, and it turns out they were, X amount cheaper, and they say, oh, look, we're going to go with the cheaper company.
Similar gear,
and that's fair. And look, I'm not going to say we're definitely not the most expensive, and we're not the cheapest, and we're not the cheapest for a reason. We invest in the right people. We have, if you want to come down to our factory and showroom, you're welcome to. Marine Telemarine. You've got customer service, you've got in-house engineers, you've got a warehouse that's got all the stock in it. We pick every kit ourselves. We don't rely on distributors to put everything together and send it to site and then, oh, no, there's been a design change, and hope for the best. So, no, we do all that. And then what we find is that customers generally get a bit of a shock, because that company will come out and say, oh, but you didn't tell us it was terracotta, you just said it was tile. Well, that's an extra. And oh, you didn't tell us that the inverter's going on this side of the wall. That's, we've got to run all these extra cables and all this sort of stuff. And that's an extra.
And your switchboard needs an upgrade.
Yeah, exactly. And this is the thing. This is, people that are, and we, I should say this too, we have a couple of options. Some people don't want people to come to their home. They just want to speak with someone over the phone. And that's okay. We've got options for that. We've got people that are in our office that speak over the phone if that's what they want. But we've also got in-house guys that go out and visit the property to do that at the first point of sale, because we want to make sure that they can identify anything. So that way, when we give you an accurate offering, it's generally on point.
Look, I personally am very much against surprises on day of install. Do I know if you have brittle tiles? Do I know the situation of your switchboard?
Yep.
Do I know where I can put the inverter? And even more hard sometimes to find a spot for the battery.
Of course.
So if you offer a site inspection as you do, that's what you need to do. If end customers think, oh, I couldn't be bothered with the site inspection, you really will not get the best outcome.
Yeah, and that's what I was saying. Like, then it becomes a surprise, and then all those extra costs bring us so close to where we were in the first place that you may well have gone with us in the first place and you wouldn't have the disappointment.
And ethically, it's actually better to give you the proper quote than go cheap price in, and then on the day of the install, use the pressure of everybody sitting there to squeeze them up. But that does happen.
It does happen. It does happen. And look, I'm not going to say that we've never been to site and recognised something that we didn't recognise at the point of sale. But the point is that our engineering team and obviously the operations team is quite good at identifying these things before we get out to site. And of course, whether it's over the phone or whether it's face-to-face, we get all the information we need, and we ask the customer, give us these particular photos, and we can make a fair assumption. And if we're not sure, we will send our service tech out to inspect it all prior to us booking in the installation, because at least then when we're there on the day, as long as there's no other variations, there shouldn't be any price changing. What I mean? It's generally, that's what it is. But also, we see it a lot, put it that way.
If I have a shady roof, a little bit of shade on the roof, does that mean I'm disqualified from solar?
I wouldn't say disqualified. Look, it does bring some limitations to the system output and maybe the capacity of the system. There's a couple of different ways we handle that. One of them is obviously with microinverters and optimized systems, so, your solar edge. Now, some people are going to say, oh, well, we've already spoken about Fronius and, they've got their shade fix sort of solution and whatever else. And they do. Every manufacturer, decent manufacturer, has a solution for that. But of course, I look at what's the best overall for the customer and amongst other benefits. So I would say if you've got shade on one section of the roof, we would try and avoid that section. Now, if it's on the south, bonus, right? Because we generally don't use the south. Doesn't mean you can't, right? Obviously, there's some limitations to it, but we use what we can and what's going to be most beneficial, and then obviously look at the right system to go with that. We don't want to give you just anything off the shelf and then all of a sudden, you're expecting to be getting X amount of output and you're only getting half of that. And that's because obviously a lot of the bypass diodes are kicking in and, not allowing the power to flow essentially.
But basically there are technical capabilities and technical solutions should you have shade.
Correct.
And you can help with those.
We can. And that's again, as a company, why we don't just grab anything off the shelf. It's making sure we give you the right solution.
There are lots of cheap solar around, we've already talked about. What are some of the kind of little sharky tricks they do?
It's hard because we don't do those sorts of ethics, so I couldn't tell you the full in-depth ways that people do it. I suppose one of them is, I personally don't believe about no interest. Right, that's my opinion. People that offer finance and say, "Oh, there's no interest." There is somewhere, right? There's a cost somewhere.
So what they do really is load it up in the top end, so your system is suddenly $1,500 more expensive, but then they give it to you on finance, so you don't kind of you're being told there is no interest, but you've actually paid it up front.
Essentially. So, and look, there's different ways, and I don't want to go into too much detail, but essentially, companies like ours don't offer interest-free. It's not something we do. We offer, your green loans, for example, your Bright, your Plenty, all that sort of stuff. They've got options there, and if it works for you, then great, let's do it. If it doesn't, then don't do it.
But in Victoria, don't you have like a government-funded ability to get an interest-free loan?
We do, and I suppose that's probably the only one that, from what I can see and understand, it's probably the only one that is a genuine interest-free, because essentially what the state government does is they say, okay, you've got a $1,400 at present, you've got a $1,400 rebate towards solar. You can have a $1,400 loan, which is over 4 years from memory, and that is interest-free. They just basically take $1,400 and divide it over the 4 years. And you also have the option for, at present, a $8,800 up to $8,800 of an interest-free battery loan. Now, of course, how that's going to work with the potential of this rebate, the battery rebate that they're talking about, could be a bit of a different scenario. But at the moment, you've got that as an option over 4 years. So that obviously helps make batteries a lot more attractive to people as well. And again, it's not a finance company that's dealing with it. You basically, Solar Victoria, you do your application, you do a couple more things with them, and they'll come back to you in a bit of time and say, hey, yep, you can do it, no problem.
Now, sometimes people still hear different things about solar and batteries, and they're not always sure if it's really going to save them money. How can you reassure me that if I go solar and battery, I'm going to save money?
Yeah, good question. I mean, we've got a big fleet of installations, and we can show you. We can show you the sorts of installations that have been done over time. If what we were offering wasn't working and it wasn't doing what we say it's going to do, I honestly don't think we'd be in business, and not just because of that. I think from all the claims of false information is probably the key. If you follow the advice and try to use the power as much as you can during the day, whether that be by using it yourself or by doing it with a battery, whichever way, there's no question that you're going to have less reliance on the grid, which therefore is going to save you more money by not having to give it away in rent, essentially, is what I call it. The more money you throw at the grid, the more money you're throwing away. It's as simple as that.
Right. So what do you save? Let's say if I have a $1,000 quarterly bill, which is $4,000 a year, what's my potential savings with the decent solar systems?
Yeah, I mean, look, if you're spending $1,000 a quarter, that's certainly up there. It depends on the size of the system, right? There's no point saying you're going to save half that and you only put in a 5 kilowatt system. You really need something like that. I'd probably be speccing up more towards the higher end, of your 13 kilowatt or something like that. And yeah, we would do the calculations based on what your output, because every roof is different, right? Just because it's rated to 13 kilowatt doesn't mean that you're going to be able to consistently get that. But of course, we'd look at your specific roof profile, the tilt, the angle and so on, and the panels that you're using. And then, do the calculations and tell you exactly what you can save based on your current bill.
Right. But I mean, it would at least be $500, wouldn't it?
Easily, not a problem.
Much more than that?
Most systems I see, $1,200 to $1,500 is probably the average. I mean, again, the more you use and the better off you can be with it, the more you can save.
Right. So if I do, for example, have a commercial solar system, let's say I have a car mechanic or something like that, or a childcare centre, then I would use most of my electricity exactly at the time that solar would be generating. Is my ROI any better for those commercial premises?
Much better. And I'm not just saying much better because that's the easy answer. I mean, it is because you're using the power, right? We did a job for a customer that basically manufactures, steel and all that sort of stuff. And they were spending like $3,000 a month. It was ridiculous. We put a 92 kilowatt system in. That $3,000 bill went down to, I believe in summertime, it was about $300.
Wow.
So, yeah. And that's, running multiple things during the day, welders and laser cutters and all that sort of stuff. And essentially, they saved a massive amount of money and essentially paid the system off in, I think it was about 4 years. And now they're reaping the benefits.
Right. So the lesson is, if you have a commercial premises and you use electricity during the day, be it a dentist, be it a childcare centre, be it a mechanic, and you have access to your roof, solar is a no-brainer.
Absolutely. And it doesn't necessarily mean you need the absolute bee's knees of a system. I mean, we wouldn't give you anything less than what we recommend, but obviously, you're going to get the right system that's going to benefit you in the long term. And obviously, if you're using that power, which you are, then that's where you're working, right? And you may not need a massive system. You know, if you're not using, you might be using a decent amount of power, but it doesn't necessarily mean you need to go and spend, $50,000-$60,000 in order to get that benefit.
Right. So you basically have to align your maximum consumption with the size of the system.
Yep.
And then just the system will power away and your consumption will power away. And if they're aligned, you got the maximum savings.
That's what it's all about.
The Labor government has just announced that there will be a solar rebate for batteries. Is there a plus and a minus to that?
I think there's a little bit more of a plus, and what it does is it means now that it makes things a bit more attractive to the average homeowner, let's say. Now, I mean, this is for potentially off-grid. This is for commercial as well, from my understanding. It's going to work very much like the STC scheme that we have now, which is quite good because then really it's not really means tested. So that means really anybody can have it. Where I like it is that now it makes the better systems, the higher quality systems, a bit more attractive. Where I don't like it is the low-end cheap stuff that's flooded in the market is now going to be a lot more attractive, and this is my opinion, right? Every company that offers these sorts of products, I see that they're gonna get a lot more inquiries and a lot more stuff going out the door. But I just worry about companies that we've seen and that have disappeared over time. Are we going to now see a revisit of that? And that's what I'm a bit worried for the market in that respect.
So basically, if you sell cheap solar, not make much profit, enough to put a bit aside, and then those batteries at year 3 years old start going pop, pop, pop. Is it worth it for you to be around, or do you just going to do a runner?
Well, that's something that the company that's offered that product would have to make a decision on. It's not all about the installation. I mean, it definitely plays a part. There's no question. If you've got a lot of these cheaper products out in the market, and all of a sudden they're all starting to have issues, and we've seen the recalls, we've seen all that stuff happening, and credit where it's due. The companies that have had those issues and recalls have said, "Yep, we've got an issue. We're going to fix it, and we're going to make it right." And they are making it right, and I think that's a good thing. But what about the companies that haven't been able to do that and can't afford to do that because they've basically sold it at such a low amount? And this is not just the
you're talking about Chinese manufacturers, really. Let's be blunt.
Essentially, the cheap manufacturers, right? That won't be able to support that. And essentially, you've got a system that's sitting there that's not working, and it could be sitting there like that for 2 or 3 months, 4 months, however many months. What do you do then? You can't then say to the installer it's the installer's fault. Well, the installer installed the job. It's been done correctly, let's say, and it's a manufacturing issue. Then what? So where I feel confident is when we're offering products like BYD, for example, the support is there. The financial bankability of the business is there, and therefore long-term longevity is there.
So basically the advice is for end customers, if you see a battery offer that is so low, like 5-6 grand or so, it's possibly too good to be true, because what you're going to get is a very small battery. You're likely to get a product that will have issues. You're not likely to find the after-sales service is going to be up to scratch. And then at the end, you probably actually got a piece of equipment in your house that nobody wants to take. So getting rid of them is even going to be difficult. So you're going to spend good money after bad to try and get rid of that gear. So isn't the logic just to get a good quality brand like a SIG Energy, a SolarEdge, a Tesla, ones that have a lot of customers here in Australia, have a lot of backup staff, and have you also have the confidence that the product lasts? Yeah,
I mean, look, from our point of view, I don't want to do the cheap stuff, and that's purely because, as much as we love you, we don't want to hear from you in that respect, because if we're hearing from you, we know there's problems. Now, yes, we're going to deal with that problem because we sold you the system, but this is why I'm not giving you the cheap stuff, because I want to feel good in myself and as a business that we've done the right thing by you, and that the products we've selected, if there was to be an issue, they can be dealt with by the manufacturer and between us and the manufacturer, no problem.
If I'm on the grid, but I'm a bit annoyed with my energy retailer because they've been jacking up the prices and I just didn't think they were very ethical, and I want to go off-grid in the city, can it be done?
Short answer is yes, it can be done. Logical answer is, in my honest opinion, I don't think it's worth it. And what I mean by that is, if you've got a very large bank account and you don't really care about how much you spend, we can make it happen. But what people have to understand is that when you're, let's say you go off grid, okay? You put a particular inverter in to spec up that off grid.
Big battery, big inverter.
You can have all the batteries and inverters you like, but essentially, if you've got too much load or it's not specced up correctly, okay, you might save that $1.30 a day in the supply charge from the electricity, right? That's fantastic. Yeah, we're going to save it, but you've got a system that may not be able to handle the loads and the peak startups that you might want to run and trip all the time. Well, that's not very good. So there are ways of doing it. I just don't think in the metro areas it's really, really wise unless you've got a lot to invest.
So the ROI is not necessary.
The ROI is something you shouldn't even consider, in my opinion. Now, I'm not saying it's impossible, right? We've done some off-grid. We've actually done a very big job. One of our reviews is in there that talks about it. With a lot of battery storage, a lot of different options. It's basically a single-phase site that we managed to turn into three-phase with some off-grid stuff, and there was a very big investment from the customer there, and it was a very tricky project to make work. It took a lot of engineering, a lot of hours, but again, we've got the capability of doing that, and if you've got a customer that understands the limitations of what the product can offer, then absolutely, we can give you whatever you like. But you have to understand it, and that's obviously where we come into it. We can educate you on that, but it's not something where you've got the grid that provides the typical power that you need in a daily scenario. And of course, if you overload the grid, it just trips your main switch, right? If you overload your inverter, it trips the inverter. So it's the same concept.
So possibly if I kind of have to be a bit careful with what I use and don't use everything at the same time, is it?
Look, you should do that even on the grid when you think about it. But as things become more efficient, as we use more energy efficient products, that risk gets lessened, of course. But of course, if you were to turn on multiple air conditioners and then at the same time you wanted to put the oven on and you wanted to then put your induction cooktop on, something's got to give because there's a lot of demand happening at that one point. So all we're saying is, in general, just try to be a bit smart with how many things you turn on at the same time.
Right. Yeah, makes sense. You and the end customer, do you kind of feel if they engage with you, they get a little bit something extra compared to other companies?
Well, I would like to think so, and I say that because as a company, and especially for as long as that we've been running, we've always believed in having the right people. I mean, our philosophy really is performance, quality, reliability, the three key factors to a system, and ensuring that what we offer you ticks those boxes, but also that we've got the right people. So if you wanted to come into our office and speak with our engineer, you can. If you want to come and see what panels look like before we put them on your roof, you can. If you want to, come in and you need some help with your solar Vic application, you can. A lot of companies, and there are still a lot of great companies out there that do a very similar thing to us, and I think that's a great thing because it shows that they're investing in the right places as well. But there's also a lot of companies, and I think really you should be looking at the quotations when you're out in the market. Where are these people based? Where are the companies based? If you're at a suite, level 4 or level 20 or whatever you want to call it, something in Collins Street, Melbourne, is that just like a small sales office?
Yeah, this probably is, yes.
And the ones that say, oh yeah, we're just in Melbourne 3001. It's like, okay, well, Melbourne's a pretty big place. Whereabouts? Oh no, we just send everything to site. It's like, well, so hang on. So let me get this right. You don't want to tell me where you are. You want me to invest all this money with you, and then if I have a problem, if you just change the number and whatever else, how else do I get through to you? So we've had the same number for the whole time, really. Same location for the last 10 years. So we haven't changed. We're, Tullamarine is where we are. And
do you have a showroom?
It's a showroom in progress. So I've recently just repainted everything, and we've got some banners up. We've got some panels going in. It's actually a bit of a blank canvas. So, we are going to be putting up some more stuff. We used to have an old showroom, and I said, no, look, we've got to revamp it. So we've done that. We've literally just finished painting it. And, we will be setting up a few things. But even without the stuff on display, as soon as you walk in, you can still come down. We can show you in the warehouse. These are the two different panels. We've got some RECs in there. We've got some ICO panels. We've got some, your JAs and your Trinas and all that sort of stuff. And if you want to see the differences, you're welcome to come down and have a look. That's what it's all about. Before we put it on the roof, see the different options. The good thing is too, we're right next door to Fronius. So if you want to see a Gen 24 battery set up ready to go, we can walk straight in there anytime. And basically, we can see in the flesh what it actually looks like and what it, how tall the battery sits and all that sort of stuff to give you a bit more of a visual rather than a photo. Sometimes pictures don't do justice. You need to see it. And, we've got those options. So I encourage people to come down and see what it's all about before we just get out there and put it up on your roof.
So how do you get your jobs? Do you get recommendations? Do you buy solar quotes? What do you do?
A bit of everything. So, look, we have got a great relationship with Solar Quotes, and we have had over the last, quite a few years really, and we've got some really good reviews on there. So we do get quite a lot of our jobs from Solar Quotes, but also, with the likes of you as well, helping us out, getting the name out there online, your Facebook. I mean, look, our advertising strategy is pretty simple. It's more about the brand and who we are rather than, flooding the market with, 5 kilowatt Wi-Fi inverter and tier 1 panels for only $999. I mean, what does that even mean? You know what I mean?
Sounds cheap.
Well, it's much, much cheaper than what we could offer. And that's because we know it can't be done right. And you can't offer quality products for that sort of amount. You've got to think, if I'm going to go and get, you don't have to have the top of the range, right? But it's like if I'm going to go and get the right product, I've got to get an installation crew out there. We've got to get up. We've got to do all the right safety things and get all the rail down and grind the tiles out properly so that way the tiles sit back on top. That's an important thing. Attention to detail is quite important. We have to have our engineers that make sure the job is going to work, or the system's designed correctly. It's going to work for you. All that doesn't come at $999. I mean, it does somehow.
Yeah, because I hide a lot of sins under the panel.
and that's the point I'm getting to. That for it to be done right, you've got to have the right people, and we've got the right people. So therefore, I know that it's getting done right. So in that respect, I sleep easy at night. In that respect, because everything that we do is to the highest standard we possibly can. And again, I'm not going to say we've never had a problem. It's how we deal with it. And I can tell you now that if there's an issue and, it needs to be rectified, we get it rectified. If it's something we've stuffed up on, we put our hand up and say, hey, look, we've made a mistake here, but this is how we're going to do it. This is how we're going to fix it. We try to do our best in everything we do. And I think really that's probably one of the reasons why we're still standing the way we are.
Excellent. Have you got some kind of nice horror stories or anything like that where you turned up and you go, oh my God, the guy kind of self-wired it or this and that, or some company really took advantage of this poor old lady or something like that?
Look, there probably is, Marcus. Look, that did happen recently. We did have a customer that rang in. They were actually a local from Gladstone Park. Basically said to us, "Hey, look, it's actually the daughter of the father," and she said, "Look, my dad, he got some stuff done a few years ago, and solar was installed, and it's never worked. And we've tried to get it connected to the grid, and they've always said, well, we never got the paperwork, and we need someone to come out and do the paperwork and all this sort of stuff." And we said, okay, look, let's do a health check. Let's come out. Let's have a look and see what it's all about. And I remember we got out there, and it was like, no, we need to start again. And some of the panels had to come off, fix up some of the cabling, take all the photos. And in most cases, depending on what it is, if it's our own work, for example. Well, I shouldn't say that, because really our processes make sure that we send the paperwork, and when we do that, we keep you involved because we CC you in on the email. So you've got record that it was submitted, where a lot of companies don't do that. A lot of companies probably don't even give you the right user manual. With us, it might not come tomorrow, the day after install, but you will get your user manual and you'll have everything itemized of exactly what's been supplied to you and what's on your roof. And that's important, to understand all that. There's a perfect example. We got a call about a commercial property, car wash. customer says, "Oh, look, I need you to come out, and my system's not working. I don't quite know what's wrong with it." And we said, "Okay, yep, no problem. Look, to help us out, to help us understand, can you provide me with, the SLD, single line diagram explains where, which panels are connected where and how many of them and so on. And have you got access to the monitoring? Oh, no, the monitoring's never really worked." And it's like, well, hang on a minute. So you got a system installed. You knew at the time what you were getting. You can't remember now because it's been like 5 years. You can't remember. All you remember is you had a, let's say a Fronius inverter or Goodwee inverter, whatever it may have been, and that's okay. But you don't know how it was wired because you never got any paperwork. Did you get a copy of the certificate? Oh, yeah, I'm not sure where it is. And it's like, for us, we've sort of evolved a little bit with how we do our user manuals, and a lot of it is, okay, here's your copies of certificates and so on when we send to the retailer, but you get a QR code next to your fire map that we have to put in the switchboard. You scan that QR code, it takes you to your user manual, and it's got everything in there. So you can download it any time, and everything is relevant to the job. And that's why, for me, it's a no-brainer having all the documentation, whether you own the property or someone else owns the property, that anyone can go up, scan that, and see exactly what's been done. Where most of these people just can't give you that information. So we have to then go out, spend all this time figuring it out, and ultimately the customer's paying us to figure it out because, we're not a charity, unfortunately. We can't go out there and do it for nothing, especially when it's not our job. Where if you have an issue with our job and you ring us up, we say, okay, what's the issue? We look at the online monitoring if we can, and if for any reason we can't, when we go out there, we know exactly what's been installed and how it's been installed, and we can isolate the issue. Where when you're walking into some of these other things, you've got no idea.
But, isn't that the customer's fault a little bit? They're not asking for the paperwork?
Yeah, look, to a degree it is. But then I also say to myself, but you just expect that as a customer. And maybe they did. Maybe they were following up with this company, and then after they, put everything on the roof and took their money, it's like they didn't matter anymore. And that's where it's really, really disappointing, because ultimately the customer's the loser.
But doesn't the whole industry lose in terms of our own reputation?
Oh, a lot of people do feel it, yeah. Then that's when people start saying, it's all a scam, or it's all this, it's all that. But there's still a few companies like us that are out there, and I'm glad that they are, because I would rather have good competition that's doing the right thing ethically and doing the right thing by the customer and so on, than trying to come up to the likes of, some of these backyard sort of operations that, as I said, it's more of an interest that they just get in, get the job, get the money and run.
You've talked about that lady at the beginning with the dad and the system and all that. You never really finished the stories.
My apologies. So getting back to that. So basically we'd gone out there. Now, it wasn't our installation. We had to take some panels off and fix up some wiring and whatever else. But ultimately the challenge was because it had been a couple of years, I think it was about 3 or 4 years, I think it was just after the rule change from memory, because when we went to certify it, the inspector said, well, you need to bring it up to current standard. And it's like, well, we can only do what we can do, sort of thing. So essentially we had to just make some adjustments and, fix up some of the wiring. And actually, from memory, we had to change the DC wiring because of the cable change. The old PV1F was no longer valid. Changed that. Everything else was sort of okay. Once we had that, basically, we were able to then get the certificate, send it to the retailer. Retailer then approved the
system.
The system to be, it was energised anyway. That's how it was when we found it. And it was working. It wasn't a case that the system didn't work. It was just the poor guy didn't have it connected. So for all these years that he's had it installed, he's never had any feed-in tariff. And now that the tariff's gone, it's even more of a disappointment, because all that potential ROI has just gone down the drain.
Right. So what was the lesson out of that?
Don't do it wrong the first time. In other words, use a reputable company that's got the right processes and practices. Make sure you're kept in the loop as well with everything, so you understand what to expect at the end of an installation. For us, it's all documented. Everything we send you tells you the whole process. Even when we book the installation, we send you a copy of the pre-design, so this is what I'm getting installed and where it's all going. And if you have an objection to that and say, actually, no, I didn't want those panels there, I want them over there, you've got the opportunity before we come out to say to us, hey, can you have a look at this? And, if you need to speak to our engineer directly, you can, and we can make those changes.
But I heard about companies, they just turn up and rock up. The customer didn't even know they're turning up that day.
Yeah. Don't be surprised. Look, for us, communication's a very big factor. I don't like the turning up unannounced or hoping. Surprise, here we are. It's important that customers are kept in the loop the whole time, and let's say, that we might be running late or something. It's as quick as our customer service team saying, hey, we're on the way, we're running a bit behind. That's what they're there for. But also to give you the opportunity to come back and say, hey, this doesn't look the same as what the salesperson that come out and saw me discussed. Is there any reason? And there might be a valid reason for it. And they say, oh, okay, now I understand it's actually going to be better for me doing it this way. Great. I'm happy with that. Go ahead. But then we also have another method when we actually get to site and we go through with the customer before we do the job. These are the panels you agreed to. Yep, tick. This is the design that you're happy with. Yep, tick. This is where the inverter's going. Yep, happy with that. Tick. Great. You authorise that. We authorise that. We do a quick check to make sure there's no pre-existing damage, because at the end of the day, if there's something up there that isn't quite right, we want to make you aware of it too. Because sometimes, and it's happened to us once before, we've gone out there and once you get up on the second story and you start working in a certain area, there could be areas where you say, well, look, your ridge capping's falling apart. I sort of want to make you aware of it. Now, this doesn't happen all the time, of course, but there was a case where we actually said to the customer, look, I recommend that you get your roof restored first before we actually do the installation. And we ended up walking away and putting it on hold for like 2 months. The time the customer got someone out, got it all restored. I mean, the installers were quite happy when they went back because it's a fresh, clean roof and everything's great. But the point is that it's not all about just getting it on the roof and getting out of your hair. It's getting there and making sure that we can do it. And if we do it, it's going to be okay. And if it's not, well, we'll tell you about it. So then And it's important, it's your home.
No, got it. And I mean, nobody goes really up on the second story, so they wouldn't know if they need maintenance.
Exactly, and that's the challenge. Even with all the imagery software that we have these days to give us some really good pictures, there's only so sharp that we can get. So it's quite hard to identify some of those things until you're physically on site and jumping up on the roof.
You're offering the Eco panel. Why?
Look, I like what they're doing. It's something a little different to what we normally see. The guys have marketed the product quite well, and the shade mitigation technology that they seem to be pushing and the product seems to be offering seems to be a bit of a game changer in the market. We've installed quite a few of them recently, and when I say recently, over the last, it's been a few months now, but look, we've never had a problem, and I know it's still early days, and part of me says, why are we doing it? And to be fair to you, a lot of it is because a lot of customers have been asking us up front. I mean, we talk about it, don't get me wrong, but a lot of customers are saying, oh, look, I've seen these Eco panels, what do you know about them? And it's like, oh, we can tell you, we've got all the info, and they're actually not a bad panel for what they are. There's other products that we offer, and some of them, I believe, are probably slightly better. But ultimately, it comes down to, what does the customer like? What's going to fit within that budget? And ultimately, what's the best overall solution for them? I have no issue doing the Icos at the moment. It's not my only offering, but it's certainly up there with the top 4.
I see really from knowing the Melbourne market, Essential Solar is in the top 10 companies in Melbourne, no doubt. Give me the key reasons.
I think a lot of it's based on our philosophy, which, again, performance, quality, reliability, the 3 main things. And that's proven because they're the products that we sort of offer to our customers.
Let me ask you, do you do really quality product? Do you do site inspections and make sure you really get it all right?
Absolutely.
Is your pricing competitive?
Absolutely.
So if I get a fair price system with a long-lasting quality, that's really the way to make most money out of solar, isn't it?
Well, it would be, but I think the fact that we're still standing shows that we've done it right and we've got the right people to support that.
Right. So you're getting a good result, you're getting a fair pricing, you get good personalised service, and you're going to be around for after-sale service.
That's certainly the plan, Marcus.
Well, that's a top 10.
Yep.
Tell me what you're offering on off-grid.
Look, off-grid, it's not something we actively push, but it is a capability. So Victron is probably one of the most that we do, followed by Selectronics if we have to, followed by now Sig Energy. So they're the 3 that we probably offer more of. We've done a few off-grid systems, but yeah, Victron's always been our primary offering, and it depends on the application. The off-grid one I was talking about before, that was a mixture of Victron and Good YEA 3-phase hybrid with BYD. There's 144 kilowatt hours of storage.
But they're all outside Melbourne, are they?
Whittlesea. So that's only, let's say, 40 minutes from Melbourne. So this customer has a single phase supply to the property, massive property, and wanted to basically have 3-phase, so he can charge his EVs, he can run his 3-phase air conditioner.
Right, so he needed, it was like a hybrid type off-grid.
Yeah. Now the off-grid is predominantly, off-grid is what powers the property.
Right.
The single phase is essentially a charger to charge the batteries in a in a backup scenario, followed by a diesel generator as an absolute worst case. So this guy's got everything sorted. Other typical off-grid systems, we've done a lot for the Department of, DECA, if you want to call it, so Department of Education, Climate Change and whatever it is, DECA is the easiest way. We did quite a few of them, a few off-grid systems for them as well, in some of the remote places that they had community events and everything else, and it was very straightforward, just a typical 6 kilowatt, but all powered by Victron and BYD, and they're still going today. We've got all monitoring and everything on them and reliable.
So that's great for a city-based company. You're offering off-grid, so if somebody looking into that,
yep,
Essential Solar,
we can do it, absolutely.
Please support the channel by liking the video, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell, and check out all our other videos. Want more energy answered? Visit yourenergyanswers.com for quality energy products, tools and calculators, and find your quality local installers. You're still here? I'll see you next time. Bye.